I managed to collect more than 160 amazing historical photographs that you must take a closer look at. Write in the comments which photo you liked the most. This is director Roland West hours after Hollywood star Thelma Todd was found dead inside her car in his garage in 1935. Officials blamed accidental carbon monoxide poisoning, but her broken nose and cracked ribs fueled murder theories involving West and mob boss Lucky Luciano. Mary Ann Bevan developed acromegaly in her 30s and joined sideshows after her husband died, determined to support their children. In the 1920s, she earned about $50,000 and proudly showed audiences family photos while answering reporters with sharp humor. In 1917, a Salvation Army worker writes a letter home for a wounded soldier whose eyes and face are covered in bandages. For many injured men, such letters were the only way to tell their families they had survived. A Japanese torpedo strikes the British heavy cruiser HMS Exeter during the Second Battle of the Java Sea on March 1, 1942. A float plane from the cruiser Miyoko captured the blast shortly before Exeter sank, and most of her crew became prisoners of war. On September 1, 1983, a Soviet fighter shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 after it entered restricted Soviet airspace, killing all 269 people aboard. The disaster led President Ronald Reagan to promise that the new GPS system would be open to civilians once operational. In May 1944, the Polish resistance recovered an unexploded German 5-2 rocket from a swamp and secretly dismantled it. Detailed drawings, photographs, and key parts were then flown to Britain, giving the Allies vital intelligence about Hitler's most advanced weapon. Caroline and John Kennedy Jr. raced toward their father as he steps from a helicopter in October 1963. Just weeks later, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, turning this joyful family moment into a haunting final memory. In 1976, Fidel Castro held baby Michel Trudeau as his mother, Margaret, watched during the Canadian Prime Minister's historic visit to Cuba. 24 years later, Castro served as an honorary pallbearer at Pierre Trudeau's funeral. This mechanical gorilla headgear was worn by stuntman Ray "Crash" Corrigan in the 1945 film White Pongo. Its metal jaws, fake teeth, and crude moving parts reveal how filmmakers created a terrifying ape before digital effects existed. During the Battle of Pilcombe Ridge on August 11, 1917, a British water cart sank to its axle near St. Eloi. One wheel and one horse slipped off the wooden track, showing how deep mud could stop vital supplies before they reached the front. On November 23, 1963, Gilligan's Island filmed the SS Minnow, leaving Honolulu Harbor for its 3-hour tour. In the background, the American flag flew at half-mast for President John F. Kennedy, who had been assassinated one day earlier. Shot between the eyes at Chickamauga, in 1863, Union soldier Jacob Miller crawled through enemy lines and walked 60 miles to a hospital. He lived another 54 years as bullet fragments slowly fell from his head. The French cruiser Dupuy de l'Homme sits in dry dock during a refit in 1899. Built to hunt enemy merchant ships, she was the world's first armored cruiser and carried 8 heavy guns arranged to fire in nearly every direction. Johnny Cash sits with his first wife, Vivian Liberto, and their 4 daughters in the late 1950s. His constant touring soon strained the marriage, and Vivian later said his growing drug use turned their family life into chaos. For decades, Switzerland dumped thousands of tons of old ammunition into deep lakes because officials believed it was a safe disposal method. Much of it still lies underwater today, and removing it could trigger explosions and release toxic chemicals. A Japanese Nakajima Ki 43 fighter intercepts American B-25 bombers over Paramushir in the Kuril Islands on December 29, 1944. One bomber, serial number 43-36128, vanished during the mission and never returned to its base on Attu Island. In 1974, 19-year-old newspaper heiress Patty Hearst was kidnapped by the radical Symbionese Liberation Army. 2 months later, she called herself Tanya and was photographed carrying a rifle while the group robbed a bank. Dolly Parton posed with artist and AIDS activist Keith Haring in 1985. Haring later opened the pop shop to make his art affordable, while Parton became one of the most successful songwriters in music history. In 1966, a coal waste tip built over underground springs collapsed in Aberfan, Wales, burying a school and nearby homes. The disaster killed 116 children and 28 adults, and an official inquiry blamed the National Coal Board. Wanrong was the last empress of China and the wife of Puyi, but palace life left her trapped and deeply unhappy. She loved jazz and secretly had affairs with 2 royal attendants, a scandal hidden inside the imperial court. McSorley's Old Ale House opened in New York City in 1854 and served only 2 kinds of ale. Women were banned until 1970, when a legal battle finally forced the tavern to open its doors to them. National Guardsmen marched toward smoke during the Watts Uprising in August 1965, when part of Los Angeles became a combat zone. 5 days of unrest left 34 people dead, nearly 3,500 arrested, and more than 700 buildings damaged. In 1881, double amputee signalman James Wide trained Jack, a baboon, to push his trolley and operate railway signals in South Africa. Railway officials tested Jack, and he reportedly worked for 9 years without making a single mistake. Workers stand beside a pineapple stall in South Africa in December 1962, surrounded by hundreds of carefully stacked fruits. The everyday scene unfolded during apartheid, when strict racial laws controlled where black South Africans could live, work, and travel. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and his chief of staff, Matome Ugaki, command an exercise from the battleship Nagato in 1941. Months later, Nagato became the flagship from which Yamamoto directed the attack on Pearl Harbor, while Ugaki ultimately died on Japan's final kamikaze mission. Liberator bombers of the 15th Air Force fly through smoke and enemy fire over Ploesti on May 31, 1944. Their target was Romania's vital oil industry, a major source of fuel for the German war machine. In 1987, Princess Diana shook hands with an AIDS patient without wearing gloves, challenging the terrifying myths surrounding the disease. Her simple gesture showed millions that HIV could not spread through touch and helped transform how patients were treated. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, chief of the Reich Security Main Office after Reinhard Heydrich, testifies at Nuremberg in 1946. He denied every charge and claimed he tried to stop the final solution, but the court convicted him of war crimes and crimes against humanity and sentenced him to death. German vehicles and artillery burn in Belgrade on October 15, 1944, as Soviet and Yugoslav forces fight to liberate the city. The battle destroyed key German escape routes, and Belgrade fell 5 days later. This photograph shows Black Kettle and other Cheyenne leaders at the Camp Weld Peace Conference in 1864, just 2 months before the Sand Creek Massacre. Kneeling in front are Edward Wynkoop and Silas Soule, 2 officers who later condemned the slaughter. On August 13, 1944, nurse Alicja Treutler married wounded cadet officer Bolesław Biega during the Warsaw Uprising. Priest Wiktor Potrzebski performed the ceremony inside a temporary chapel on Moniuszko Street as fighting continued across the city. This aerial map shows Hiroshima after the atomic bombing on August 6, 1945, with numbered landmarks across the destroyed city. The blast killed tens of thousands within hours and flattened nearly everything close to the marked center. On a 1950s transatlantic flight, passengers slept in reclining seats under wool blankets while a flight attendant checked the cabin. Before non-stop jet travel, crossing the Atlantic could take more than 15 hours and often included several fuel stops. This is Brandon Teena with his girlfriend Lana Tisdale in 1993, shortly before he was murdered in a notorious anti-transgender hate crime. 6 years later, his story inspired Boys Don't Cry, earning Hilary Swank an Academy Award for portraying him. American troops crowd a landing craft bound for Oran, Algeria, during Operation Torch in November 1942. Vichy French forces resisted the Allied invasion, but Oran surrendered after 3 days of fighting. Benito Mussolini poses on a bicycle, carefully turning an ordinary ride into a political photo opportunity. Images like this helped his regime sell the dictator as energetic, disciplined, and physically strong. Born into slavery in Kentucky, Winnie Johnson later became one of the highest-paid performers of her era, after her weight reportedly rose above 600 pounds. Widowed and unable to walk after severe frostbite, she joined sideshows to support her children and earned $1,000 during a Detroit appearance in 1887. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi stands with soldiers of the Japanese garrison on Iwo Jima in 1944. He built a vast tunnel network and banned reckless charges, turning the island into a hidden fortress that resisted American forces for 36 days. In September 1938, Chamberlain, Daladier, Hitler, Mussolini, and Ciano met in Munich and handed Czechoslovakia's borderlands to Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union offered to help defend Czechoslovakia alongside France, but it was excluded from the conference. Crew members stand beside giant scissors and a massive pencil built for the 1957 film The Incredible Shrinking Man. Director Jack Arnold used oversized props to make an ordinary man appear terrifyingly small. After her husband broke her arm, Meredith escaped with her dog Rebel and walked from Oregon to California. Donna Ferrato photographed the homeless pair in Santa Cruz in 1999, sharing a high five on the sidewalk. Romania, 1917. During the Battle of Marashti, Romanian troops broke through German and Austro-Hungarian defenses. In just 11 days, they captured 30 villages and 500 square kilometers, proving that Romania's rebuilt army could strike back. Built in 1942, Hamburg's St. Pauli bunker was designed to protect thousands of people while anti-aircraft guns fired from its roof. Today, the massive war fortress contains a hotel, music venues, and a public rooftop garden. Ukrainians crowd outside a Soviet Torgsin shop during the Holodomor of 1932 and 1933. Inside, starving families traded gold, jewelry, and other valuables for bread, while the Kremlin seized both their food and their last possessions. A mother smiles at her sleeping newborn in a hospital during the 1940s. At the time, many hospitals kept babies in separate nurseries, so quiet moments like this were often limited. The RMS Queen Elizabeth was transformed from a luxury liner into a troop ship that could carry more than 15,000 people at once. During the Second World War, she transported over 750,000 servicemen, often with far too few lifeboats for everyone aboard. In 1966, a woman stopped outside the Adele Ross clothing store in New York to read its shocking anti-miniskirt sign. It joked that women wearing dresses 6 or 7 inches above the knee should buy diapers, while even shorter dresses could be used as belts. After Russia's crushing defeat at Tannenberg in 1914, General Alexander Samsonov vanished into a dark forest and shot himself, repeating, "The Tsar trusted me." German soldiers found and buried his body, and 2 years later, his widow recovered it through the Red Cross and returned it to Russia. This is Mount Rushmore before carving began in 1927 and after its completion in 1941. Nearly 400 workers shaped the 4 presidential faces, removing about 450,000 tons of granite, mostly with dynamite. In 1952, American soldiers were ordered to advance toward a nuclear explosion during a desert rock military exercise in Nevada. The troops wore ordinary uniforms, while commanders studied how soldiers would perform on an atomic battlefield. In 1955, a Lawrence Livermore intern known only as Tommy ate lunch inside a station wagon while sitting on 2 suitcases holding a nuclear bomb. The weapon beneath him was reportedly small enough to be carried by just 2 people. A fur trader sorts valuable pelts in Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, during the 1890s. Founded in 1788, the remote trading post became one of the oldest European settlements in the province and a major center of the Canadian fur trade. This Avro Lancaster of Royal Air Force 514 Squadron was photographed over burning oil tanks at Bec d'Ambe on August 4, 1944. The bomber flew through towering smoke as explosions tore across a fuel site, supplying German forces in occupied France. From 1951 to 1992, the Nevada National Security Site conducted 928 nuclear tests involving 1,021 detonations. Many were fired underground, and the enormous craters still visible today reveal where the desert was blasted apart. This rare photograph shows the High Muslim Court of Tlemcen in French-ruled Algeria between 1856 and 1857. Muslim judges continued to rule on marriage, divorce, and inheritance, even as the colonial government steadily stripped power from Islamic law. Allied forces found these badly damaged German Panther tanks on railway cars bound for the MAN factory for repair in 1945. Their missing tracks and scarred armor reveal how urgently Germany tried to return wrecked tanks to battle. This German field bakery near Ypres in 1914 used mobile ovens to produce bread close to the front. Soldiers shaped hundreds of loaves by hand, feeding an army whose daily bread supply depended on operations like this. A grinning boy secretly hangs a firecracker from a policeman's coat in London on November 5, 1925. The dangerous prank was part of Guy Fawkes Night, when fireworks filled Britain's streets. Soviet soldiers and museum staff returned Tretyakov Gallery masterpieces to Moscow in 1944. The collection had survived the war, hidden thousands of kilometers away in Novosibirsk. In 1937, Peter, a 6-year-old alligator at London Zoo, became famous for calmly cuddling with his keeper. The photograph captures the unlikely moment as Peter rests in his arms with his jaws wide open. In the 1980s, a worker climbed a ladder to clean the teeth of a giant Tyrannosaurus statue at Birmingham Zoo in England. The bizarre routine made the motionless predator look dangerously alive. In 1951, Soviet dogs Mishka and Chizhik flew nearly 100 kilometers above Earth in a sealed rocket capsule. They survived their first flight, but died weeks later when the parachute on their second mission failed. In 1942, a British soldier demonstrates an Enfield EY rifle fitted with a cup launcher for the No. 68 anti-tank grenade. Fired with a special blank cartridge, the grenade used a shaped charge to pierce armored vehicles from dangerously close range. In June 1933, workers at the American Museum of Natural History cleaned the enormous skin of an elephant before mounting it for display. The rare photograph reveals how taxidermists turned a flattened animal hide into a lifelike museum exhibit. A truck carrying gin overturned in Arnhem, the Netherlands, in 1952, spilling hundreds of boxes across the road. Curious locals quickly gathered around as police guarded the valuable cargo from disappearing. Around 1920, circus performer Artoria Gibbons displayed Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper tattooed across her back. Her husband, Charles Red Gibbons, created the masterpiece that helped make her famous as the Living Art Museum. An Italian immigrant mother balances her family's belongings on her head at Ellis Island in 1905, surrounded by her 4 children. Most immigrants passed medical and legal inspections within hours, but a failed examination could separate an entire family. A worker sorts German helmets collected during the Second World War, many still scarred by combat. Today, rare markings, original paint, and battle damage can make an authentic helmet worth thousands of dollars to collectors. In 1954, Marilyn Monroe paused at the Beverly Hills Hotel to sign an autograph for a 13-year-old fan. The photograph captures a private, unscripted moment with the most famous woman in Hollywood. The cangue was a heavy wooden collar that trapped prisoners in public, often leaving them unable to eat without help. Though usually meant for punishment and humiliation, extreme cases ended in slow death from hunger, exposure, or untreated wounds. Ferenc Šiš drives the 90-horsepower Renault No. 10 during the 1905 Vanderbilt Cup, with mechanic George Dmitrievich beside him. 1 year later, Šiš won the first French Grand Prix at Le Mans, racing for more than 12 hours over 2 days. In 1907, the White Star Line's Adriatic became the first ocean liner with an indoor swimming pool. It was actually a small plunge bath inside a Turkish bath complex, an astonishing luxury for passengers crossing the Atlantic. This rare photograph shows boxer Jack Johnson at his farewell dinner in Sydney in 1907. The Colored Progressive Association hosted the event, 1 year before Johnson became the first black world heavyweight boxing champion. When Andre the Giant died in France in 1993, no local crematorium could handle his enormous body. It was flown to North Carolina, where 4 workers and a forklift were reportedly needed for the cremation. In 1960, French troops guarded the Kasbah in Algiers, watching for unrest during the Algerian War. Beside an armed soldier, a street barber calmly shaves his customer as military patrols control the neighborhood. Nurses rush into Farringdon Market after a V-2 rocket struck on March 8, 1945. The blast killed 110 people, many of them shoppers waiting to buy rare wartime meat. On February 24, 1940, workers placed a fake Luftwaffe aircraft against a British home to create a realistic air raid scene. Soldiers then posed as casualties while rescue teams across Portsmouth, Gosport, and Southampton practiced for the destruction German bombers could soon bring. In the early 1980s, Vietnam veterans marched to expose the harsh reality awaiting them at home. Medals did not guarantee jobs. Many struggled with unemployment, trauma, and a public that wanted to forget the war they had been sent to fight. German troops retreat west of Moscow during the brutal winter of 1941 and 1942 after the Red Army shattered their advance. Extreme cold, inadequate clothing, and frozen vehicles turned the withdrawal into a deadly struggle for survival. During the siege of Leningrad, 11-year-old Tanya Savicheva recorded the exact deaths of 6 family members, one by one. Her final pages read, "The Savichevs are dead. Everyone died. Only Tanya is left." In 1932, a man stood outside Bankers Trust on Wall Street, demanding the return of his entire life savings, $2,950. His sign publicly named the bank, turning his personal ruin into a direct accusation. In November 1944, women of the Royal Naval Service loaded a mailboat with letters and parcels for sailors aboard ships moored in England. Known as Wrens, they carried the messages that connected naval crews with home during the final months of the war. At the Vietnam Veterans Memorial dedication in 1982, a veteran embraced a woman beside a sign defending the monument. Its message answered critics who hated the memorial's dark design. "If it makes it difficult to send people into battle again, I'll like it even more." On August 26, 1913, workers excavated the Pennsylvania Railroad tracks in Pittsburgh's Homewood neighborhood to change the steep Homewood Avenue grade. Steam equipment, temporary rails, and crews transformed the busy railroad corridor while trains still had to navigate the construction zone. In 1911, whiskey legend Jack Daniel died from a blood infection that began in his toe. A famous story claims he injured it by kicking his safe after forgetting the combination, but historians say that detail may be a myth. Eva Hart was 7 when her father placed her in a lifeboat as the Titanic sank in 1912. He died that night, and decades later she studied this replica while fighting efforts to salvage items from the wreck. This crater-covered landscape hides the German 5 one-launch site at Fleury, built in northern France during the Second World War. Allied bombers struck the area so heavily that hundreds of explosions erased much of the facility before it could launch flying bombs against Britain. In 1939, the sons of a migrant worker built these homemade scooters in Jefferson, Texas. Their rough wooden frames and salvaged wheels reveal how children created their own fun when money and factory-made toys were out of reach. Some Soviet tankers ended aerial refueling by dumping around 300 liters of kerosene directly over the receiving aircraft. The fuel dispersed rapidly in the slipstream, but the procedure still depended on altitude, airflow, and precise handling to prevent a fire. This rare photo shows a vast chamber inside the Aberloffenny slate mine before it flooded, while miners were still cutting rock there. The fragile ladders climbing the sheer walls reveal how workers reached dangerous ledges high above the chamber floor. In 1912, miners in South Wales sat packed inside a steel cage before being lowered deep underground. They descended hundreds of meters to face explosions, collapsing rock, poisonous gas, and coal dust that could make any shift their last. In April 1953, a 100-year-old woman ground coffee by hand in her Pittsburgh kitchen. Born before the American Civil War, she lived long enough to see electricity, automobiles, radio, and television transform daily life. During the Battle of Manila in February 1945, a Filipino family pulled a wounded relative through the ruined streets of South Manila in search of American medical aid. One woman walked beside the cart with a bandage over her injured eye, showing that the family had already suffered another casualty. 4 5th Marine Division demolition officers inspect a captured Japanese buzz bomb on Iwo Jima in March 1945. Launched from the island's north end at night, these buzzing weapons often missed American camps and crashed into the sea. This is Victoria Musprat beside her mansion at 71st Street and Shore Road in Brooklyn. Just before Christmas in 1934, she was found murdered inside the house, turning the Grand Bay Ridge home into the scene of a chilling mystery. Thousands of cattle packed Denver's stockyards, where animals were sorted, sold, and loaded onto trains. The vast maze of wooden pens helped turn Denver into one of the largest livestock markets in the American West. Around 1900, quarrymen worked on a near-vertical rock face with a rope looped around the thigh instead of a safety harness. One slip could tighten the rope against the leg while leaving the worker hanging above the quarry floor. In 1967, an M48A3 tank and an M88 recovery vehicle became trapped when a bridge collapsed over the Thai Tin River. The vehicle sent to recover the tank ended up stranded above it. Sears once sold live donkeys through its catalog for $79.95 each. Buyers could order a saddled burro on monthly payments and have the animal shipped by train. George Mallory and Sandy Irvine vanished near the summit of Mount Everest in 1924, leaving it unknown whether they reached the top first. 100 years later, explorers found Irvine's boot, sock, and foot in melting ice, but his camera and the answer remain missing. At 17, Bosnian resistance fighter Lepa Radic helped wounded civilians and carried supplies for the Yugoslav partisans before German forces captured her in February 1943. Moments before her execution, she refused to reveal her comrades, saying the people would expose them when the time came. In 1904, Swedish sailor Carl Emil Pettersson survived a shipwreck near Tabor Island and began a new life among its people. 3 years later, he married Princess Singdo, and after her father died, Pettersson reportedly became the island's king. On March 5, 1956, King Kong made its television debut on New York station WOR. Its huge ratings turned the film into a television sensation and helped unleash a new wave of classic monster movies. In Libya in 1941, Italian generals Mario Rowata and Attilio Teruzzi study attack plans with German commander Erwin Rommel. Their alliance looked united on paper, but bitter disputes over supplies and strategy repeatedly weakened the Axis campaign in North Africa. On May 5, 1980, the Special Air Service stormed the Iranian embassy in London after gunmen killed a hostage during a 6-day siege. In just 11 minutes, the soldiers rescued 19 hostages, killed 5 attackers, and became famous worldwide as the raid unfolded live on television. Born into slavery in North Carolina in 1851, conjoined twins Millie and Christine McCoy became internationally famous singers and performers. After gaining freedom and control of their careers, they earned a fortune, bought their former enslavers' plantation, and supported a black school and church. In March 1968, Polish crowds held signs reading "Zionists to Israel" as the communist government launched an anti-Semitic purge. Thousands of Jews lost their jobs, were forced to leave the country, and had their citizenship revoked. This rare daguerreotype from the 1850s captures a young woman smiling, while most people in early portraits kept perfectly still and looked serious. Her expression feels unusually alive because long exposure times made even a small smile difficult to hold without blurring the image. Built in Tychy, Poland during the 1970s, this brutalist playground slide was made almost entirely from concrete. Its giant spiral and steep ramp turned an ordinary children's play area into something resembling a military obstacle course. In 1943, Jane Russell posed with a revolver for artist Zoe Mozart, who used the sitting to paint the famous poster for The Outlaw. The film was delayed for years because censors objected to Russell's revealing scenes. At 23, Rosemary Kennedy, sister of John and Robert Kennedy, was forced to undergo a lobotomy arranged by her father. The failed operation left her unable to speak clearly or walk normally, and she spent most of her remaining 64 years hidden from public view. In October 1987, 2 Soviet MR-24 gunships mistakenly landed 30 kilometers inside Pakistan, where Chitral scouts arrested all 6 crewmen. The captured helicopters gave Pakistan rare access to one of the Soviet Union's most feared weapons. An Ethiopian chief bows before Italian troops during the brutal invasion of 1935. Italy used poison gas and modern weapons against fierce Ethiopian resistance, but the occupation lasted only 5 years. Adolf Hitler was photographed with a German Shepherd on his 50th birthday, April 20, 1939. Less than 5 months later, Germany invaded Poland, turning this quiet birthday portrait into a chilling image from the final months before the Second World War. On November 5, 1951, a B-45 bomber dropped the Easy atomic bomb over the Nevada desert. Its 31-kiloton blast was twice as powerful as the Hiroshima bomb and became the largest explosion of the 7-test Buster Jangle series. Kevin Peter Hall, Richard Chavis, and Arnold Schwarzenegger posed together on the set of Predator in 1987. Hall, standing at 7 feet 2 inches tall, played the deadly Predator, while Chavis played Poncho, and Schwarzenegger led the team as Dutch. In 1961, John Bulmer photographed a woman hanging laundry beside Ocker Hill Power Station in England's heavily industrial Black Country. Her clean washing was exposed to smoke and soot from the chimneys and cooling towers surrounding her home. In 1971, Ray Tomlinson sent the first networked email and chose the @ symbol to separate a user from a computer. That same year, the Vietnam War raged on, linking the birth of modern digital communication with one of the most brutal conflicts of the 20th century. Valencia, Spain, 1937. A terrified crowd gathers outside a morgue after an air raid during the Spanish Civil War. Their faces reveal the human cost of bombing campaigns that brought death directly into crowded cities. In February 1974, Tom Baker was carrying bricks and making tea on a London construction site when he was chosen as the 4th Doctor. This photo captures him celebrating the life-changing news with his co-workers over cups of tea. This rare photo shows Phoolan Devi, the feared bandit queen who surrendered to Indian authorities in 1983 after years as an outlaw. She later became a member of Parliament, but was assassinated outside her home in 2001. In 1962, Jacqueline Kennedy and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru watched a snake charmer perform during her famous goodwill visit to India. The rare photograph captures an unusual private moment from a tour that drew enormous crowds and strengthened ties between India and the United States. In 1919, a Boston storage tank burst and unleashed more than 2 million gallons of molasses in a wave moving 35 miles per hour. The disaster killed 21 people, injured over 150, and trapped rescuers in a thickening flood. A rare Kodachrome photo shows Marilyn Monroe preparing backstage for the Jack Benny Show on December 4, 1953. She reviews the script while her dress and hair are adjusted moments before filming. In 1947, Holocaust survivors lit a menorah inside a displaced persons camp in Austria. The Hanukkah ceremony took place as thousands of Jewish refugees waited for permission to rebuild their lives in new countries. In 1980, custom gunsmith Jim Hogue built this extraordinary M1911 with an 11-inch barrel. Despite its huge size, it fired several 5-shot groups, measuring under 2 inches. In the 1920s, garment workers spent long shifts cutting and sewing heavy fabric with fast, unguarded machines. One slip could crush a finger, while cloth dust and crowded wooden workshops made fires a constant threat. The Japanese transports Hirokawa Maru and Kinugawa Maru burn after being driven ashore on Guadalcanal on November 15, 1942. They belonged to a convoy shattered while trying to deliver thousands of troops and supplies to the island. On June 1, 1942, Japanese midget submarine No. 14 was lifted from the bottom of Sydney Harbor. Trapped in an anti-submarine net during the previous night's attack, its 2-man crew destroyed the vessel with an explosive charge, killing themselves before capture. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor without warning, killing 2,403 Americans and pulling the United States into World War II. This photograph shows Battleship Row burning, where the USS Arizona exploded and trapped more than 900 sailors inside. Armored personnel carriers and Romania's communist police bloc Magheru Boulevard during the 1989 revolution. Within days, the uprising ended Nicolae Ceausescu's dictatorship, and he was captured, tried, and executed alongside his wife. In March of 1982, fitness model Anita Gandil posed for a local magazine, displaying a muscular physique rarely seen in women's photography at the time. The striking portrait captured the moment female bodybuilding was beginning to gain wider public attention. A Japanese bomb exploded inside the hangar of the USS Franklin, igniting armed and fueled aircraft on March 19, 1945. Despite 807 men being killed, the crew saved the burning carrier, photographed here from the cruiser Santa Fe. After a B-52 crashed over Palomares, Spain, in January 1966, one hydrogen bomb vanished into the Mediterranean. It was found nearly 3 months later at a depth of about 870 meters and lifted aboard the USS Petrel. In December 1942, German soldiers and a Panzer III crossed a makeshift bridge during Operation Winter Storm, the desperate attempt to reach Stalingrad. The rescue force was stopped less than 60 kilometers from the trapped 6th Army. On March 1, 1954, 4 Puerto Rican nationalists opened fire from the House Gallery, wounding 5 members of Congress. This photograph shows house pages carrying one victim toward an ambulance, while the attackers were captured and every wounded lawmaker survived. On November 26, 1965, France launched Asterix into orbit aboard its own Diamant A rocket. France became only the 3rd nation capable of launching a satellite independently, breaking the space monopoly of the United States and the Soviet Union. On November 10, 1898, white supremacists overthrew Wilmington's elected government and killed black residents. This photo shows a white crowd posing beside the burned office of the Daily Record, a black-owned newspaper. Around 1900, J.W. Waldron's tiny Brighton workshop repaired both bicycles and traditional metal goods. The huge penny farthing outside was already becoming obsolete, replaced by safer chain-driven bicycles with two equal-sized wheels. A sharecropper family warms itself around a barrel stove in a temporary Missouri camp in 1939. Sharecroppers paid landowners with part of each harvest, a system that often trapped families in debt and forced them into makeshift homes. Princess Fatima Sultana of Afghanistan was photographed during her extraordinary visit to Washington in 1921. A professional imposter posing as a naval officer helped her secure a meeting with President Warren Harding at the White House. Around 1910, guards line up convicts and exiles working on the Amur Railway in Russia's Far East. These prisoners helped build the final section of the Trans-Siberian Railway through remote land, brutal winters, and deadly labor camps. This photo shows prisoners raising their fists during the Attica Uprising in New York in 1971. 4 days later, police stormed the prison, and gunfire killed 29 prisoners and 10 hostages. Outside the United States Embassy in Moscow in 1958, broken protest signs covered the street after a furious demonstration. The crowd was protesting the deployment of thousands of American Marines to Lebanon during a political crisis. Hillary Rodham in 1969, the year she became Wellesley College's first student commencement speaker. Her bold speech drew national attention, and that fall she entered Yale Law School. On August 2, 1943, the crew of the American B-26 Marauder Miss Emily posed at Manston, England, after a combat mission. They were smiling beside the bomber, even though enemy fire had torn a huge hole through its nose. Soviet sniper Liza Mironova takes aim from behind a stone barricade during battle in 1943. More than 2,000 women served as Soviet snipers in the Second World War, but only about 500 survived. A ship's cat sits beside the engine order telegraph on the bridge of the American destroyer USS Nicholson. The warship survived Atlantic convoys, Leyte Gulf, and Okinawa, earning 10 battle stars during the Second World War. In 1977, Muhammad Ali playfully sparred with Michael Jackson at the heavyweight champion's Pennsylvania training camp. It captured 2 global icons before Jackson released Off the Wall and became the biggest pop star on Earth. During his 1959 American tour, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev proudly held an ear of corn while visiting an Iowa farm. He hoped American farming methods could help feed the Soviet Union, but his massive corn campaign later failed in unsuitable climates. This photograph from around 1880 shows a Victorian woman whose natural hair had grown far beyond her feet. Such extreme length required years without cutting and hours of careful washing, drying, and brushing to prevent tangles and damage. During the London Blitz in 1940, this man slept inside a stone sarcophagus for protection from falling bombs. Its thick walls offered an improvised shelter when safer spaces were unavailable. Soviet soldiers listened to a violin and accordion during a break between battles in April 1943. Music gave exhausted troops a rare moment of relief before they returned to the front. In 1967, crowds across China performed the loyalty dance to prove their devotion to Mao Zedong. The ritual used simple, repeated movements inspired by Mao's quotations and became a public test of political loyalty during the Cultural Revolution. On March 19, 1943, crews hauled the capsized battleship USS Oklahoma toward an upright position after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. 21 electric winches pulled massive cables anchored on shore, slowly rolling the ship out of the harbor mud. In 1933, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow posed together while hiding from police during their deadly crime spree. Just 1 year later, officers fired more than 100 bullets into their car, killing them both. Sophia Schultz, billed as the Fat Dwarf, was a frequent visitor to this Victorian photography studio. During the 1880s, she began growing facial hair, which photographers made look even thicker through retouching. Traders at a Moscow market performed desperate acrobatics to escape an Oman police raid in 1995. Some climb over the iron fence in seconds, while one man in a suit makes an especially risky getaway. This rare photo shows an early Moscow driving license from the Russian Empire, complete with the owner's portrait and official signatures. Drivers had to be at least 17, pass medical and driving tests, and obey a city speed limit of just 13 kilometers per hour. Castle Bravo exploded at Bikini Atoll in March 1954, becoming the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated by the United States. Its 15-megaton blast was far stronger than expected, spreading radioactive fallout across nearby islands and exposing hundreds of people. This African boy rides a homemade wooden scooter built from rough planks, wire, and hand-carved wheels. The striking photo shows how children can turn discarded materials into working toys when factory-made bicycles are far beyond their reach. Robert Wadlow stands beside his father in 1938 when he was 20 years old and already the tallest person ever recorded. A pituitary disorder kept his body growing until he reached nearly 9 feet tall. A young Navajo woman photographed in 1948 wears traditional silver jewelry, including a squash blossom necklace decorated with coins. Navajo silversmiths transformed silver into powerful symbols of identity, wealth, and family heritage. This photograph from 1899 captures a young couple kissing in a pumpkin patch while a woman works just behind them. The staged comic scene was sold as a stereoscopic card, giving Victorian viewers a surprisingly intimate image in 3 dimensions. During the 1960 campaign in Amarillo, Lyndon Baines Johnson furiously shouted at nearby pilots to shut down their engines. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, waiting to speak, grabbed his running mate and tried to calm him as cameras captured the chaotic moment. A poor peasant father stands barefoot with his 4 sons in Nizhny Novgorod Gubernia in 1902. Their worn clothes and bare feet reveal the harsh poverty endured by millions of rural families in the final years of the Russian Empire. In 1986, a worker seized a soldier's rifle during a violent clash between miners and military police at Brazil's Serra Pelada gold mine. Tens of thousands of men worked there by hand, carrying heavy sacks of earth through mud in search of gold. In 1980, Black Panther Party co-founder Huey P. Newton posed with armed Palestinian resistance fighters outside a refugee camp in Lebanon. The rare image captured the Panthers' little-known international ties with revolutionary movements far beyond the United States. Often cataloged as pre-war sailors of the Soviet Baltic Fleet in Leningrad, these men turned an open parade ground into a raw display of strength. The exact date, location, and identities remain unconfirmed, leaving the story behind this striking photograph unsolved. In June 1978, Muhammad Ali toured the Soviet Union with his wife, Veronica Porche, turning the trip into an extraordinary honeymoon. In Tashkent, the world's most famous boxer tasted Uzbek plov, met local people, and traded luxury resorts for a rare journey behind the Iron Curtain. Write in the comments which photo you liked the most.